What's going on, everybody? It is the NFL Experts. I'm Wayne G, joined as always by Mark D. What's going on?
What's up, Wayno? Party on, man.
Absolutely. I am excited to talk some football. We had some playoffs. We had a big win, which I'll talk about in a second. But first, please make sure you are following us on social media. That is at NFL Experts. It says it right here on the screen. If you're not watching, you're listening. NFL Experts, spelt the classic way. Pod at NFL Experts Pod. So you visit YouTube, you visit Twitter, you visit whatever at NFL Experts Pod, at NFL Experts Pod on Instagram. Get our images there. Email us NFL Experts Pod at gmail.com. You can email us topics, questions. We'll bring them up here. We've done that a few times. So definitely get involved with the show. You're part of it too. So we want to make sure everyone feels included via social media.
Yes, everyone, please chime in. We love the content.
Now, I do want to say that we did have an influx of comments last episode, which is awesome. Love the interaction. Love people getting involved. I blame myself for what happened. I let things get a little out of control because I was trying to get to all the comments.
Yeah, damn it, Wayne, what's wrong with you, bro? Come on.
Get
right.
Get everyone involved. But no, I felt like what I need to do now is we're going to kind of screen these comments before we throw them up there. Make sure it's relevant to what we're talking about so that there's no little comment beef going on that I'm throwing these 8 comments in a row up that make no sense based on what we're talking about. So if you are throwing comments in there and you're just arguing with each other, those comments probably aren't going to get posted unless I post it by accident. So let's try to keep it relevant.
All right. Keep the trash talking to another site, not for the NFL Experts.
And speaking of other sites, my boys over at Man Hour Radio / Man Hour NFL. I'm wearing my shirt, my hoodie, NFL. Make sure you guys check these guys out. They are Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. I usually watch while I'm at work. I comment just like you can here. They throw the comments up because I keep it relevant. But we had a bet with them last week, Wildcard weekend. Straight up pick them, no points. Who can get more right? And guess what? We beat those guys. Why? Because we are the experts.
No help to me. I went 2 for 4, but Wayne went 4 for 2. So thank you, Wayno.
Yeah, absolutely. Big thing was picking the Packers. I had them winning, obviously, which is funny because I did have the clip where I was saying, like, even though the Cowboys have a better offense, better defense, home field advantage, I'm picking the Packers, and Packers won.
Dude, I regret not picking the Bucks, man. I had that gut feeling about it, and I thought about against it, and I went against my gut, man. Never do that.
Don't do it this week because we are going to do it again this week. We got the divisional round playoffs. We're going to beat those guys again because we know what we're doing. They don't. It just is what it is. Now, if you're thinking I'm being a little too harsh, the reality is we didn't bet any money. It's just betting for bragging rights. So I'm collecting my paycheck every time I say they suck.
Yes, collect that paycheck, Wayne.
Now, speaking of the not divisional games, I'm sorry, the wild card games. Let's dive into the first game that we have here. This one was the Texans and the Browns. Blew my mind, this game, because all 4 of us picked the Cleveland Browns, and the Texans came out and won 45-14. I was completely blown away watching this game. I know they had 2 defensive touchdowns, which you can never really predict, but CJ Stroud looked incredible.
Dude, he did look incredible. That guy can throw the ball deep so well. But like you were saying, the 2 defensive touchdowns, that was Joe Flacco throwing 2 pick sixes back to back. That pretty much like sealed it for them to lose the game.
It did. And I think that I kick myself. You talk about kicking yourself for not picking the Bucks. I kick myself for not picking the Texans because I said on our show, Joe Flacco is going to cost the Browns this game. And then I went and I picked the Browns.
And dude, he did cost them the game because I'm telling you, they had a chance. They were driving. Then he throws the pick 6, and I was like, okay, they can maybe come back from that. Then he does it again, and there's no way they were coming back from that one.
There isn't. And like I said, it was just a fun game to watch because of CJ Stroud and because he's a rookie and he's performing so well. And I love the kid. He's very humble. Obviously, he gives the Jesus talk during every interview, kind of like Tim Tebow. You know, I don't know if he's as open about it. I think he is as open about it as Tebow, his religion. I think that he just doesn't get as much coverage as Tebow did.
He always talks about his dad, too. His dad's like in prison, and he's been trying to like find a way to get him out. And I know he's like, my dad didn't do anything wrong. I don't even know the background of all that, but yeah, I know he mentions that a lot too.
All right. Let's get to our first comment. Let's make sure here. And we do bring up a comment that's relevant to the playoffs. Jim Powell joins us. He says, Packers beat any team in the league if they play like they did against the Cowboys. They played great. We're going to talk about it, Jim. We are going to talk about that game. We're still on the first game of the weekend, though, and that is Houston Texans and the Cleveland Browns. So I did put some stats here. CJ Stroud, 16 of 21, 274 yards, 3 touchdowns. A lot of big plays. He didn't throw the ball a lot, but when he did, he was connecting on 35, 40-yard passes.
Like I was saying, the deep ball, man, he was throwing some beautiful deep passes. There was one that he even missed in the game that it would have been even more so. Like, yeah, he throws a beautiful deep ball, and he's not afraid to fling it. I love that.
Now, Flacco did have 307 yards, but he did have the 2 turnovers. And that really did seem, even though it's a 31-point victory, it really did feel like those 14 points really started to blow it open. And at that point, you have to start throwing the ball deep on every play.
They did pretty much. They abandoned the run game, which is like a really good part of their offense. And when they got into catch-up mode, they abandoned it, and that didn't help them because I think their offense is goes by the play action, you know?
Now, Jim Powell does say that Houston keeps CJ healthy. They are on top of the South for years to come.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about Tunsil locking down Myles Garrett. That was huge for the Texans.
Oh, what? Because that's the Browns' defense is Myles Garrett putting pressure on the quarterback, forcing him to make turnovers. That's what the Browns lived on all year. If you can shut down Myles Garrett, and they don't have Jadeveon Clowney over there like they did last year, that's it. That's all they got. You know, I love Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Great, like middle linebacker that can get to the ball carrier. He's very good at that, but he's not really a sack machine. So it's really Myles Garrett, and that's it. And yeah, Laremy Tunsil took him out of the game, and that was the game.
That was key for them. I'm telling you, like that's going to be key for them for the rest of their way going through the playoffs. You have a good left tackle, man. That's a quarterback's best friend.
It is, and I think that definitely neutralizing the pass rush is where it's at because a good pass rush will neutralize any quarterback. I don't care how good you are. Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees. It doesn't matter. If you're getting hit every other play, you will not perform well. And so if they can keep CJ Stroud upright, give him time, no matter what pass rush they're facing, and they have a really good one they're going to be facing next week, they're going to be pretty good.
And I think that was key to a lot of those deep passes is because he had time to throw, dude. You know, he had time for those plays to develop for him to throw deep like that. So, yeah, they have good ball protection.
The next game that we are going to talk about is going to be another AFC game. That is the Kansas City Chiefs beat the Miami Dolphins 26-7. I believe we all picked the Chiefs in this one. We knew it was going to be cold. It was cold. We got to see the helmet, quote unquote, shatter. We'll talk about the shattering helmet in a second. But let's talk about this. Yes, very cold. Tua goes out there, continues his poor streak of playing in cold weather. I don't think that Tua played awful overall, if I'm being honest. I mean, 20 of 39, 200 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. I don't feel like he cost them the game, but I also feel like he didn't do anything that would help them.
No, he didn't. And like you said, it adds another one to his record of not playing well in the cold. I feel like they're just like a one-man team sort of in a way. Like if Tyreek Hill's not out there making plays, it's like who's gonna do anything? Like I don't know. That's just how I've always felt about them. And one thing that's weird about the Dolphins, like I feel like ever since they went into this, I'm weird about uniforms, Wayne. We talked about it last podcast. I feel like they need to go back to that old Dolphins logo. Those uniforms were much tougher. I feel like you have a tougher mentality. Like you look good, you play good, kind of the whole Deion Sanders thing. That's just a little side note. But besides that, Rashid Rice looked freaking amazing for the Chiefs. Can we agree on that? That guy is awesome. Like he was their number one weapon. He had 8 receptions for 130 yards, a touchdown, 12 targets in the game. Like as long as Mahomes has him, I think he's going to be good in the playoffs.
Well, him and Kelsey, I think definitely. And that's something that surprised me about this game. When I turned it on, I thought, -8 degrees, -40 with the wind chill. This is going to be a ground and pound game. And Kansas City came out slinging the ball.
They did. I was really surprised with that. And like I was really surprised that Rice was this guy. Dude, like if you watch the highlights after the game, it was just like Rice, just throwing him the ball constantly. Like that guy was just moving the chains all game for them. Like I was saying, that guy's going to be his number one weapon going forward.
Well, for a little bit, unless they sign somebody else. I thought they should have signed DeAndre Hopkins this offseason instead of him going to the Titans. He made a huge mistake. Why would you go to the Titans? It must have been just about money. But he could have been in Kansas City catching those passes from Patrick Mahomes, possibly playing for a Super Bowl down the road. I don't know if they're going to make it that far. We'll touch on that in a minute.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to make it that far either. when we get to that part when we pick. But yeah, dude. But they got to play the Bills now in Buffalo. I know we're going to talk about those games, but that's going to be a tough game. This is going to be the first time that Mahomes has to go on the road and play in the playoffs.
So Jim Powell does say Miami has always been riding on the undefeated season since I've been old enough to watch, and I was born in 72. Marino was my boy from Pitt, but they haven't wanted it for a long time. I don't like saying teams don't want it, you know, because they all want to win. A lot goes into it. And this Miami team, I feel like their defense wasn't built for this. When you get to the playoffs, it's all about the defense. I don't care how good your offense is. I know we can talk about the Rams back in 2001 or 2000, but when you get to the playoffs, it is your defense that wins, which is why teams like the New York Giants beat the Patriots twice after 9 and 7 seasons, you know, because their defense was legit. Their offense could do crap. Eli Manning couldn't do crap, but you put them against the Patriots, you neutralize Tom Brady, you win the game. And I just feel like Miami's defense wasn't built for a playoff run. Their offense was, but look what happens when they run into the number 2 scoring defense in the NFL and the number 8, pass completion percentage defense in the NFL. You're going to have a hard time, especially in cold weather in Arrowhead Stadium. I just felt like it was a receipe. The Dolphins were destined to lose this one. They never had a chance.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I don't think they had a chance going into that game. Maybe it was one of those games like they just wanted to like get out of there so bad because it was so cold. Maybe that's why they played so bad. I don't know. Maybe I feel like that's a part of them that they need to figure out is how to play in cold weather. Like I know they play in hot, humid Miami or whatever, but I don't know. Like they need to figure out when it comes to playoff time, they got to play in that stuff, and that's part of the reason that they might not ever go far.
It could be. I do want to touch for a moment on the quote unquote shattered helmet because I was on Twitter kind of going back and forth, getting changed, doing whatever. And I see like Patrick Mahomes' helmet just shattered. I thought, oh, that must look really cool because it's cold. And I turn it on. A piece of the helmet came off, people. It didn't shatter. I was expecting like just fragments everywhere. No, it was just a little tiny piece of the top came off.
Everyone was saying that it was like, oh, from the hit and all that. Like, dude, those guys get so much hits in those helmets. There's no way that it was from a hit. I think that was from like Mahomes constantly probably being pissed and nailing on the ground and it constantly getting wear and tear. And the cold finally did break it. So let's not say that it was the hit.
Okay. Well, I think the hit attributed to it.
It did. But I mean, the impact of the hit wasn't the reason why that his helmet broke.
I think the cold was the biggest reason because the cold makes that plastic really brittle and tight. So I think it doesn't take much to kind of get a piece to break off.
I thought it was funny because you never really seen that in a game before. It was really weird. And then he didn't want to come out of the game. They kept letting him play. And then finally, when he got out of the game, on the sideline, they were trying to put him a new helmet on. And he said it was frozen. And if you looked, he put it on and it looked all funny on him. And it was a disaster. It's like, he said that they kept it somewhere where it was frozen. So that's why when he went to go put it on, it didn't fit right. And then it wasn't warmed up and whole ordeal.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll have to deal with that next week. Another cold weather game. This one was postponed initially because of the snow and safety concerns. And that was the Bills and the Steelers. And the Bills end up winning 31-17. Again, I think we all picked the Bills here because we felt like the Steelers might have been the worst playoff team in recent memory. Even though the record indicated otherwise, their statistics were atrocious. And Buffalo was just coming in, playing really great football. I think we kind of knew this was going to be the outcome.
Yep. The Bills basically started off the game 21-0. So they were already smashing them. And the Steelers kind of made a little bit of a surge late, but it wasn't enough. Like you said, we knew that Steelers they weren't going to win that game.
Well, what was interesting to me is when you look at their stats after the game, team stats, yardage was about the same. The Steelers actually had more passing yards. The Bills had more rushing yards. They both had the same amount of first downs. They both had the same amount of sacks, pretty much. But the big difference was those 2 turnovers by the Steelers. It's a 14-point game, 2 turnovers, 2 touchdowns. We're talking about a tie game.
Yep. But also, I want to compliment Josh Allen because he spread the ball around, dude. He threw a touchdown to Kincaid, to Knox, and to Shakir instead of just throwing to Diggs all the time, which I thought was good. He needs to do that for them to be successful.
Well, he's got good receivers. He should spread the ball around. And we talked about this a couple of shows ago. We said once these guys with these cannons for arms stop being gunslingers and start being game managers, that's when they win games. That's when they win Super Bowls.
And that's what he did. He managed the game and he threw it all around.
I did like it. Now, I do want to ask from the outcome of this game, obviously there was a lot of talk about Mike Tomlin, right? And could this be his last game? And we talked about it before. I just thought it was just a ridiculous idea that this guy could never have a losing season, but still be on the hot seat. Now, he's come out and said he's going to coach the team next year. It's not really up to him. But if I'm the Steelers, I don't think they move on from Tomlin. Again, he got you 10, 11 wins. He'll get you 10, 11 more next year.
Well, I don't think it's that they want him to. I don't think it's that they'd want him to go. I think it's up to him. And I thought it was really interesting that after this game in the press conference, they asked him about his contract and he walked out, which I've never seen him really do. So that really interests me. It's like, what was that about? Was that because he didn't like the question? Because he doesn't have a new deal set up? Like, I don't know. I didn't. That didn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
No, well, Tomlin also, I'm not going to lie, he comes across as a bit of a baby in interviews. He does complain a lot. He does cry a lot. So I don't really love the way he tackles interviews. I've seen him, I think he was complaining when they played the Patriots years ago about how the Patriots had rigged with his headset or something. I don't know, something stupid. He's like, that's just what you expect when you come here. And I don't know. I don't like him in interviews. The best interviewer in the NFL is Bill Belichick. I mean, we just got to admit that's how would he handle that question? Of like, hey, Bill, we got to ask you about your contract situation and be back coaching the team, next year. He'd be like, I don't know. I don't want to talk.
But like you said, he did tell his team that he is coming back for one more year because he still has one more year on his contract. So it's like put up or shut up for the Steelers if they want to give him a big deal for him to stay. And if Tomlin doesn't want to stay, he'll just play out the year and then go up somewhere else.
I mean, he seems like a lifelong Steelers guy. I mean, he was there under Cowher, right? I mean, he's a Steelers guy. Where's he going to go?
Yeah, I
It'd
thought
be weird.
so too. But after all this talk, it kind of seems like he's on the way out.
I got to ask you about Mason Rudolph. I mean, he played well, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. I think that, 229 yards, 22 of 39 passing, not bad. I don't know if he's won the starting job from Kenny Pickett, but I think what he's done is kind of shine a light on how bad Kenny Pickett was this year.
Yeah, I was going to say they don't really have a quarterback. All the guys there are like Mason Rudolph was just their best option at the time. And he just was brought in just to give him a spark, which it did. They won 3 games in a row to get in the playoffs. So it did help, but he's not the long-term answer. They need to figure something out because I don't think Kenny Pickett is either.
Now, Jim Powell does say the media is always looking for blood in the water. Of course they are. Jim, you would love this article that I wrote recently for Fansided that they're going to kibosh. You're never going to see it. But I do criticize the media for blowing things out of proportion in order to get clicks. That is definitely what they do. And then Jim also follows up with send Tomlin and Minshew to Vegas. You really like Gardner Minshew, Jim? I don't know. I mean, he's all right. He's a good backup.
I don't know. I heard Mason Rudolph connected to us, the Broncos. I'm not too enthused about that one.
Well, if you can get him on the cheap, he comes in as a backup, just competes for the starting role,
I guess.
Let's bring it over to the NFC. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers demolished the Eagles 32-9, beat them up. I called this is one of the ones that I got. I know you said that you feel bad about not picking them. I did pick them because I said the Eagles have just played down to their competition all year. The supercomputer rankings never lied, despite what anyone might have said. They just weren't that team. And they went up against the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers are a physical team that just beat them up.
Can we just say that they had an epic failure? Epic failure. Like you lose all those games towards the end of the year, you limp into the playoffs, and then you can barely score 9 points against Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is a good team, but they're not they barely eked into the playoffs themselves. So it's like we were talking about before. Like the Eagles defense looks terrible. Hurts still doesn't look great like he did last year. He had a terrible game, 25 for 35, 250 yards, 1 touchdown. They couldn't get their run game going. I think it really hurt them that A.J. Brown was out. They just that's why I should have picked the Bucs. As soon as that first drive, I was just like, damn it, I should have picked Bucs. Damn it.
Well, I'm glad that you brought up Jalen Hurts because Jalen Hurts is the perfect example of what we just talked about, and Baker Mayfield is the perfect example otherwise. Baker Mayfield is known as the gunslinger. When he came into the league, that was his MO. He was going to be the next Brett Favre, the next Tony Romo, sling the ball over the field. And he did. He did his best. got the Browns to the playoffs. However, what we've seen now is a new Baker Mayfield all season long that manages the game, spreads the ball around. In this game, he's 22 of 36, 337 yards, 3 touchdowns. That's what happens when you stop gunslinging and you start game managing. I think Jalen Hurts is still in the gunslinger phase. He hasn't learned how to manage the game yet.
Dude, I would totally agree with that. And I think part of the reason why Mayfield has kind of come into his own is because he's been humbled, man. He got tossed around. The Browns did him wrong. I've said that on this podcast a few times. The Browns did him wrong. He got tossed off to the only team that would want him was Carolina, which is awesome team to be on. I'm being sarcastic if people can't understand that. And then he goes to the Rams, which is probably his best fit. He has some good games there. Then they're not going to keep him because they have Stafford. But then he gets a good chance in Tampa, and he does something with it. So you got to give him credit for that he was humbled, and he came out and was like, okay, I was humbled, but I'm going to come out and I'm going to be the same guy that I used to be.
Now, Jim Powell does join the comments. He says he's a Raider. I'm guessing that's to Gardner Minshew. When we're talking about Gardner Minshew, he's a Raider. And then Jim says, I said earlier in the week, Jason Kelsey decided he was done. He was the linchpin, and they couldn't run the brotherly shove. Come on.
Yes, Jim, thank you for saying that, because the first time ever the Bucs stopped the tush push. I could not believe it. That's why you kind of knew that the Eagles are done, man. When a team finally ends that play, it was over. That's how I knew it. I was like, I couldn't believe what I saw.
Well, I think they said that the key to the play, stopping it, was one, taking out Kelsey's legs so that he falls and he can't push. And then you have another guy jumping.
What Buccaneers. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, whatever Buccaneers player it was, he got way under Kelsey, so Kelsey couldn't go under, and that was the key to the blocking it.
Right. So they figured it out. I mean, it was just a play, really, and that touchdown. And I think that, just the Bucs outplayed them. I expected the Bucs to outplay them, and they did. I don't know how far they go from here. I'm happy to see the Baker Mayfield story. I'm curious to see where it goes from here. I know we do have some topics after we get through our predictions about quarterbacks and things like that, so I don't want to step on any toes. But I'm happy for him. I'm glad to see him get on to the next round. I'm not sure if he continues, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping that Tampa drops the ball and somehow maybe my Broncos can get him.
He'd be a good fit there.
He would.
The NFC game, this was one of my favorite games, was the Packers and the Cowboys. I called this one 48-32. Jordan Love had a great game, 16 of 21, 272, 3-0, almost an identical game to what CJ Stroud had.
Well, what about Aaron Jones, man? Aaron Jones had 3 rushing touchdowns, and he's from Texas, so that was an awesome homecoming for him.
Yeah, it's good. And I love when teams pound the ball. That's part of the whole game manager mentality. Run the ball, then pass if you have to. Maybe a play action on second down now and then. Manage the game. Throw 21 passes, but completes 272 yards and 3 touchdowns. You can do that when your running back is getting chunks, 6-7 yards. And Aaron Jones had a really great game. The Packers in total had 143 yards rushing. Now the Cowboys had 123. The Cowboys actually had more yards than the Packers did. They also had 37 first downs. The Packers only had 22, but the Cowboys had 2 turnovers. That was really the difference in the game.
And I think the score is kind of misleading. The Packers were beating them 28-0 before they even scored a touchdown. So that 32 points was a bunch of garbage time touchdowns, and all those yards and stuff, all garbage time.
Now, I do have to ask, because we mentioned the quarterbacks. Obviously, Jordan Love is a guy who I praised him last week, coming into the game. He was 10 touchdowns to 1 interception, completing 75% of his passes or something like that. I was happy to see him continue his journey. I said he had to win this game. This was the big step for him. He's done that. So first question, first quarterback, Jordan Love. Does he get a 5-year, $250-ish million contract extension? Because he's on the books next year, I think, for 10 or 15. But I think he's earned a big time contract extension and shown that he is the future quarterback of the Green Bay Packers.
I totally agree with everything you just said, but the Packers are very conservative, dude. So they might not want to do that right away. They might want to let him play out that year, see if he does well again, and then give him that big deal. But I think you're right. I think he's earned it, man. Like I said last podcast, he's played better than Aaron Rodgers did in his first year starting. That says a lot, man. And I think also LaFleur, their coach, really likes it too, because he gets to open up the whole offense. Aaron Rodgers was so and he's stuck in his ways. He didn't want to run the whole offense. He was just going to run whatever he wants to run, call audibles when he wants, and didn't want to run the whole LaFleur offense. LaFleur now gets to do that with Jordan Love, and you can see it. It's successful, and I don't know what Rodgers was missing out on. Like, he should have been running this offense.
Nope, exactly. And Jim Powell chimes in and says, I agreed with you. Youthful will whip old and lazy every time. I don't know if the Cowboys are old and lazy. Maybe that was a game before with the Eagles, but they aren't old and lazy either. So I don't know. I think that I was happy to see him do well. I don't want to put anything on the Cowboys. Jim says he may be the future, but let's see how deep he gets into this run before we call him Favre Jr. I'm going to be honest with you, Jim, and if you think that's a hot take, I think he might be better than Brett Favre or Aaron Rodgers and be the best quarterback in Packers history.
Whoa.
Just based on what I've seen this past year. He's already learned how to be a game manager because he sat for 3 years. So he's learned how to do that. He doesn't have to go through the gunslinger phase that Rodgers did, even though he sat. Favre was a gunslinger right to the end, so he never gave it up. I think that Love is an incredibly smart quarterback, but he has the gunslinger arm. He's just got the game manager mind. That's going to go a long way. And when all is said and done, I think that he is going to be a first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback.
Well, if that's the case, he's got to win more than one Super Bowl.
No, because Aaron Rodgers is going to be a first ballot. He only won one.
Well, I mean, if he wants, what you're saying, if he's the best Packer quarterback over them, he's got to win at least 2.
I disagree because I don't buy into the whole Super Bowl rings or NBA championship rings. You know what rings are? Fancy jewelry. That's all they mean in the world. So I don't really care about rings. Now I'll tell you why I don't care about rings, because I will say a quarterback like, who's a quarterback with multiple rings? Eli Manning. Eli Manning has 2 Super Bowl rings. He's beaten Bill Belichick twice in the Super Bowl. He has 50,000 career passing yards or something crazy, right? Is Eli Manning better than Dan Marino?
No.
Well, doesn't Dan Marino have to win at least 3 Super Bowls to be better than Eli Manning?
Yeah, I guess you're right. That's a good point. I wouldn't have thought of it from that perspective.
Yeah, it's just rings. It's just jewelry. But
well, I mean, you got to look at it from the Hall of Fame perspective, from fan perspective. Like, everybody goes out championships, and if you're saying that he's going to be the best in Packer history, he's got to do better than them, and he's got to one up them by 1. That's all I was saying.
Now, Jim does say that's a bunch of history, and I agree. We're talking not really a bunch of history. We're talking 3 quarterbacks, right? We're talking Bart Starr, we're talking Aaron Rodgers, and we're talking Brett Favre. Nobody's going to be considering Dan Markowski in the argument for the best Packers quarterback of all time. It's going to be Jordan Love when all is said and done. So I do agree there's a lot of history there. Before we get, because I don't want to get off on tangent about Love, because obviously I could talk about him all day. I love the guy. I love Love. But let's talk about the other quarterback. Let's talk about the other quarterback, and that is Dak Prescott. Now, I happen to feel I feel Dak is kind of getting a bum rap, for this, because he played well. He had 403 yards passing. A lot of that was coming behind against a prevent defense. But I've watched Dak now for the last 3 seasons. When he's healthy, he's an accurate passer. He throws a good deep ball. He leads the receivers well. I feel like he's unfairly getting blamed, even though he had the 2 interceptions. I feel like he's unfairly getting kind of blamed for being a bad quarterback. What are the Cowboys going to do? Should they move on from Dak Prescott? Dak is another guy that should be a lifelong Cowboy, in my opinion. And the Cowboys should be happy.
No, I agree with you. Like, he's about to get paid too, because he's coming off the final year of his deal. They're going to want to make his cap number real friendly for them. So I could see him getting an extension this offseason.
I think he should. If he doesn't, then maybe whenever he's eligible. You say he's eligible this season. Is he an unrestricted free agent, or is he?
No, he's got 1 more year on his deal, so he'll have But usually, when players have these deals, that's when they want to get another one done, is in that last year. So he's going to want to get an extension this offseason.
Well, and the Cowboys are going to have questions. That's going to be talk. Is going to be like, should they bring in Kirk Cousins? Should they trade for Russell Wilson? Right, or should they stick with Dak Prescott? And I think you got to stick with Dak. I don't think he's done anything to lose the starting job. So you're certainly not going to give it to Trey Lance. So I think that, he's the guy.
Well, the more talk that I hear, I don't really even hear stuff about Dak. I hear more about Mike McCarthy and how his job may be in jeopardy. I think Dak's job is safe.
Which, again, we talked about this last episode. I don't like talking about him. He's won 36 games over the last 3 years. Now, I know he hasn't gotten to the big game, but you can fire a guy like Arthur Smith that goes 7-10, 7-10, 7-10. But you can't fire a guy that goes 12-5, 12-5, 12-5 just because he didn't win the Super Bowl.
I think it's because of all the big names that are out there now, Wayne. Your boy Bill, Pete Carroll, Mike Vrabel, Jim Harbaugh. There's some big names out there. So if one of these teams is thinking about making a change at head coach, this is the year to do it.
But here's the thing is that they have no cap space. They don't have a good draft pick. This team is what it is next year. Next year in training camp, they have the exact same roster. So what you're saying, if you replace the coach, is that Mike McCarthy is the reason they've been losing. And I don't know if he is. I think it's just sometimes that's the way it goes.
I don't know. I feel like it'll have to like the blame's got to go somewhere. If you're not going to blame Dak or the team, like it's got to come from the leader of the team, So you're right. He's won games, but he hasn't won in the playoffs. He's been embarrassed in the playoffs.
Well, we just talked about Dak. Dak threw 2 interceptions in this game. They lost by 16 points. Those 2 interceptions were costly, right? Dak did not play especially well despite the yardage. So you're telling me if you bring in Jim Harbaugh, Dak doesn't throw interceptions anymore?
No, you're right. I don't think a coaching change is really what they need, but Jerry Jones is crazy, man. So I can see him like thinking Belichick's out there. He's like, maybe, maybe.
Pop culture reference, Jerry Jones is a horse loose in a hospital. If you know, you know. So
if you know, he likes the glory hole.
Jim Powell says he will have a chance to prove it in Cleveland next year. LOL. I don't know if he means Dak or definitely not Love. It'll be probably Dak if he goes to Cleveland. I don't know about Cleveland though, because they still owe Deshaun Watson a ton of money. I don't even want to get into that whole debacle.
That's a whole nother can of worms.
It is. So I had said yet last week, this was my favorite game of the week, and
me too.
It wasn't. It was not, though. It was actually the Dallas game was my favorite. But when all was said and done, this one was my favorite leading up to it. And this one, my heart was broken. I told you I wanted Matt Stafford to win and go to the Super Bowl and make it hard for me to decide between him and Lamar. And they lost 24-23 to the Lions. He was booed. Remember we said he didn't think he was going to get booed. He got booed.
Well, I don't think they booed him initially, like when he came out for warmups, but I think once the game started, then they booed him.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's all fair.
He got a little respect.
Yeah, you don't have to cheer for the other quarterback. I'm just saying that I was surprised. I was actually surprised. Jared Goff played really well. Stafford didn't do anything to lose the game. Stafford played great, but it just a 1-point game. That's sometimes the way the cookie crumbles.
Like I was really glad that this to me this was the best game of the weekend because it had back and forth scoring. Both teams were spreading the ball around. Stafford was 25 for 36, 367 yards, 2 touchdowns. Goff was 22 for 27 with 277 yards and 1 touchdown. And the Lions also had 2 rushing TDs. So there was a lot of scoring going on. So you were right. Stafford didn't do anything to lose the game. I just think that he didn't have enough possessions, and it's just how it goes sometimes.
Neither team turned the ball over. So this is not a game that we can say, hey, it came down to turnovers. It didn't.
Right.
It just came down to the team that played better. So there's so many good storylines in here. Obviously, I was rooting for Stafford. That's the storyline I wanted. But I also think that Dan Campbell's a great storyline. Dan Campbell came into this team. They were trash. Everyone laughed at him. Remember, he was talking about biting knees and playing.
Yeah.
He's a crazy guy. He's a horse loose in a hospital. Dan Campbell's looking pretty darn good as the head coach right now. If we're talking about people who've earned extensions, Dan Campbell's earned himself a nice extension.
Let's talk. I don't know. I know I mentioned it earlier when we were doing midseason awards. Dan Campbell was my guy for comeback coach of the year. I think, and I still stand by that. Like he took the Lions from who are like a no-name team that would never make the playoffs to a team that almost made the playoffs last year to this year being a 2 seed or 3 seed and then beating the Rams who just won the Super Bowl a couple years ago. Yeah, man, give that guy some money.
Yeah, Dan Campbell's earned it. And I do have to ask you about Dan Campbell since we're talking about quarterbacks and we talked before the show about throwing shade at people. And after the game, Dan Campbell says, "You're good enough for effing Detroit, Goff." Right? So kind of throwing shade at the Rams. Yeah, throwing shade at the Rams for kind of saying you're like, he wasn't good enough to win a Super Bowl with them. So they had to go get Stafford.
They didn't think so. And they got rid of him. And we talked about this last podcast. Like, I thought Goff kind of got the raw deal in the whole thing. He was just kind of tossed aside in the deal because they wanted to get rid of him. So they gave the Rams a first round pick, or the Rams gave the Lions a first round pick just to take him. So, I mean, he really got cast off. So I really like to see that he won, man. He was kind of proven wrong.
I mean, he's a number 1 overall draft pick. We knew he had talent. here's the funny thing, though. It's a fun compliment to him, and it's fun to talk about. But in reality, if the Rams felt that Jared Goff was not enough, and so they went out and got Matt Stafford, weren't they kind of proven right when Matt Stafford got the trophy?
True, very true. But what I'm saying, like, if you look at it from Goff's standpoint, he was like, "Hey, man, they didn't want me, so I'm going to show them that they should have wanted me."
Yeah, and maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But overall, he ruined my playoff run because I really was rooting for Matt Stafford to have a deep run, and so now that's
Dude, the
ruined.
Rams lost. I would only won one game, Wayne, so I needed that win. Thank you, Detroit.
Yeah, but I picked the Rams, so it wouldn't have mattered. It was a wash.
True.
All right, so let's talk about the upcoming games. We have no scores for these games. We have the Texans at the Ravens. The bye week is over. A 2-week bye for Lamar Jackson as he goes into this game. I'll get your thoughts on it. Obviously, we saw CJ Stroud play really well. Now he's going to Baltimore. He just played at home. Now you got to go on the road. And this Ravens defense, the Browns defense is good. This Ravens defense is faster and probably more physical all around at every position.
I totally agree with that, but I'm still going to go back to what I said last podcast, that as I really hope that they're not rusty. Like, I hope that this week off or 2 weeks off they had was, I hope they got some work in, because I hope they're not rusty, because that's the only way that I think the Ravens lose this game is if they come in and not play up to their par and they're rusty. But otherwise, if they come out like they play always, they're going to run over the Texans.
Well, we'll see what kind of strategy they employ at the start of the game, because I would think after 2 weeks off, those first 3 or 4 series, you got to be handing the ball off at least twice on the first 2 series, then maybe mix in a play action in that third series. You don't want to come out slinging it after 2 weeks off.
Yeah, they got to get the run game going for sure, and that's like one of their bread and butter for their offense. So they got to get that going right away. So I agree with you.
And obviously, CJ Stroud, we love the story. We think it's great. Laramie Tunsil can block whoever he wants over there, whether it's Clowney, whether it's Queen, whoever it is. But there's plenty of other guys blitzing from other places that I think are going to get to CJ Stroud. And this is the week that we're going to find out, not last week against the Browns when neutralized was Garrett. We're going to find out this week against the Ravens what CJ Stroud is.
Definitely, because he might not have as much time to throw. And then also, the Ravens have a really good secondary, so he's not going to be able to throw those deep passes with as much ease as he did last week.
Now, we mentioned the 2-week bye, but let me mention this. Prior to taking that week off and having Huntley play quarterback the last week of the season, because they'd already locked up home field, number 1 seed, Lamar Jackson had won 6 games in a row. He was 250 yards a game passing, 13 touchdowns. He is the MVP. In my opinion, he's hands down, should be unanimous again. There shouldn't even be any question about it. But he gets the MVP. He's playing amazing. The Texans defense is fine. I don't think they're good enough to stop Lamar Jackson. I don't think any defense in this league is good enough.
No, I don't think they don't play. And the teams that don't play Lamar that much they're very surprised when they finally do play him. They see his speed in real life and they're shocked by it. And I feel like that's what's going to happen to the Texans, man.
Well, over that 6-game winning streak, he only ran the ball about 9 times a game. And that's what I like to see. I mentioned this before. He's a pocket passer who can run, not a runner who can throw. So it's important to make that distinction because he will stay in the pocket and throw. And that's dangerous for the Texans because let me give you this statistic. The Houston Texans allow opposing quarterbacks to complete 68% of their passes. That is not going to be a good news for them against the Ravens.
No, because also I should mention Mark Andrews is going to be back. They activated him off the injured reserve, so Lamar's number 1 weapon is back. So look out.
And not only that, then we have to talk about Lamar. Here's another Lamar statistic. Let's compare him to Joe Flacco. Well, we know Lamar is way not Joe Flacco, right? And Joe Flacco threw 2 interceptions. Joe Flacco is a gunslinger. He's one of those guys who never became a game manager. He was slinging it till he died, just like Favre.
Yep.
Well, Lamar Jackson is a game manager. He's figured it out, and he has the receivers and the weapons to do it. So you take that fact that Lamar is a game manager, but also runs a 4.4, and so if he gets out of the pocket, he can kill you. And you look at he's had 5 passing touchdowns against that Dolphins defense, which is better than this Texans defense. I just think that this is going to be a really, really long game for the Texans. I think the Ravens are going to win this one. I'm going to give you my score prediction while we're here. 34-10. blowout.
All right. I'm going Ravens 31-17 blowout.
Okay. All right. So you're at 14. I'm at 24. So a little bit bigger blowout on my end. 17, I guess, and only 31. Are they going to take their foot off the gas pedal fourth quarter? Just maybe.
I think so. You know, they're trying to keep Lamar healthy, like you were saying.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Well, that's a good question. Well, let me ask you this. So he's had 2 weeks off. Let's say he goes in, looks pretty good, not MVP Lamar, but he looks good enough to win the game. Fourth quarter rolls around, you're up a couple of touchdowns. Do you leave him in for the rest of the game because he's already sat for 2 weeks? Or do you pull him and say, all right?
That's only if it's like a complete blowout. If they're beating him by like 3 scores, and then maybe I might sit him.
Okay. But just leave him in there otherwise. And just tell him, don't run the ball.
Yeah, we're just going to throw it, or we're going to run the ball. You're not going to run it. We're going to hand it off, and we're going to run out this clock.
The other AFC divisional game is the Chiefs and the Bills. Boy, this sounds familiar. We've seen this.
This one's going to be spicy.
It's in Buffalo, another cold weather game. And although I did look up 23 degrees, it's going to be a heat wave compared to Arrowhead.
You're right. Yeah, definitely.
So that's what we're expecting for the weather. Now, they played each other December 10th, and the Bills won that one 20-17, and that was in Arrowhead, I believe. So
that was the game that Mahomes complained about, remember?
Oh, that's the one with Kadarius Toney? Is that the one?
That was the one.
Okay, yep. Hopefully he won't get a chance to screw it up for them. In that game, Mahomes, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Allen, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. KC lost a fumble that game. That was the difference in that game, was that KC fumbled it and they lost it. And other than that, it was a pretty even game. I have Mahomes here. He's 12-3 in the playoffs now. At some point, you got to bet against him. And I mean, my thing looking over Josh Allen's stats, so he's only 5-4 in the playoffs. That's his knock, right? Is Josh Allen doesn't win in the playoffs, even though he just won last week. But you look at his playoff numbers, 20 touchdowns to 4 interceptions playoff wise. That's a 5-1 touchdown to interception ratio. He's not losing these games for Buffalo. He's
right.
doing everything he can. And his 101.6 passer rating in the playoffs is outstanding. I think this could be the game where Kansas City is knocked out.
I would have to agree with you, man. I've been saying all year on this podcast that this is probably Mahomes' worst season as a quarterback, which really isn't bad compared to most. This is probably his worst receiving core that he's had. Like I was saying, like his one weapon last week was Rashid Weiss, and if the Bills double him and Kelsey, he ain't gonna have a lot to throw to. He's gonna have to figure something out. And then besides that, he's got to go on the road for the first time, which he's never done. He's got to face that hostile environment in Buffalo when it's cold. Like you said, even though it's still going to be 20 degrees, but it'll be cold. So, yeah, I picked the Bills to win this game.
And the Bills and the Chiefs both have top 10 defenses. And so I looked at how Mahomes performs against top 10 defenses this year and how Allen has performed against top 10 defenses this year. Both of them, identical passing percentage, 56.5%, atrocious for them, both of them, against top 10 defenses. Here's the difference. 11 touchdowns to 6 interceptions for Josh Allen. So let's call it 2-1. Whereas Mahomes, 3 touchdowns to 3 interceptions, or 1-1. That's going to be the difference. Mahomes has thrown more interceptions this year. He hasn't thrown enough touchdowns. He's not going to do it against his Buffalo defense. So at the end of the day, who's the guy that throws more touchdowns? It's going to be Allen. And I have the Buffalo Bills winning this game 27-20.
Oh, and ours are close. I'm going to say 27-24. They eke it by with a last-minute field goal.
So it's not like they're up 3 and they just kind of ride it out. They're going to have to kick one to win it?
Yes.
Oof, that's some pressure on the kicker.
It's going to be like 24-24 and then 27-24, Bills win.
Now, wouldn't it be crazy?
It's going to be the opposite of the year of that Super Bowl and they missed a field goal.
Now, wouldn't it be crazy if that's what happens, let's say in the opposite direction, but let's say, Josh Allen goes out there, throws for 285 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick, and loses by a field goal because it's just that close.
Dude, that would be brutal for him,
It's like, what more can I do?
Right.
The NFC, we've got the Bucks and the Lions, and we talked about this one. Baker Mayfield going to Detroit. The last 5 games, that's the wrong one. I have the wrong card. There we go. Or I say something stupid. So both teams, physical, grinded out teams. I expect this one to be Again, a lot of short passes, screen passes, and run plays. I don't think we're going to see a lot of deep balls out of either of these teams.
Nope. I see that because I feel like Baker and Goff are kind of similar in the pocket in a way. Like they don't really run unless they absolutely have to. So yeah, I see. Like I totally agree with you on that. But the Lions are at home, man. Yeah, I don't know if you watched that game, but man, their crowd is loud. So I hope Tampa is ready for that.
Yeah, I mean, Tampa's going to have to be ready for that, and it's Detroit fans. Yeah, they love this Detroit team. The team is looking really good. I do have Goff versus the Cowboys in Week 17 versus Mayfield versus the Saints in Week 17. So this is the game before basically, they got to the playoffs. And Goff was 19 of 34, 271, a touchdown, 2 picks. Mayfield against the Saints, 22 of 33, 309, 2-2. There seems to be a lot of similarities here. I think what this is going to come down to, and I'm going to predict it before I predict the score, and you can tell me your thoughts. I think that this game is going to come down to 1 turnover.
What makes you think that?
Because both of these teams are defense first. Both of these teams are run first over pass, and both of the quarterbacks are game managers. So something has to give. The game's not going to end in a tie. They don't both get to move on, right? So the deciding factor to me is going to be the fact that Baker Mayfield, even though he has taken on the game manager persona, there's still a gunslinger inside his heart. And I think that he's going to have a play that costs him.
Oh, so you say that Baker throws a pick?
At some point, might be in the first quarter, I guess, and that starts things off. It might be in the fourth quarter, but 1 pick by Baker Mayfield is what's going to decide this game.
That's that's kind of a Swami moment that you got there, Wayne. I'm going to be looking out for that when I watch the game. I'm going to go Lions as well. I'm going to give the score first. I'm going to go 28-14 Lions.
Big score. I wonder if that'll beat the over. I wonder if the over will be on that. I have 16-10, so I'm taking the under.
Like I said, I don't ever look at spreads. I just think the Lions they're gonna win big at home.
Okay, well, maybe they do.
They're gonna win their first NFC Championship game since 1993.
An NFC. So you have them picking them for the next round as well?
No. I'm just saying they're going to advance to the NFC Championship game.
Oh, okay, gotcha. All right. I thought you said they're going to win their first NFC Championship game.
No.
Speaking of the team that I think will, so we've got the San Francisco 49ers. We've got the Packers visiting. Yay for the Packers, winning the game against the Cowboys. They did a great job. Now they're about to run into a buzzsaw in this San Francisco defense. This defense is lights out bananas. We talked about the Ravens defense. This defense makes Dallas's defense look crazy. I don't think Jordan Love has that kind of game here, even though I did put the stat last week. I mentioned the last 5 games. Last 5 games now for Jordan Love, 73.9% completion, 269 yards per game, 12 touchdowns, 0 interceptions.
Oh, man. I agree with you. I think the 49ers are going to steamroll them. I feel like the Niners are really going to be hard to beat, especially with the week off. I feel like I said many times, they're a team that wakes up in the morning and they want to run through a brick wall. So I don't feel like the rest hurt them. I feel like with them, they needed the rest because the way they are, their mentality is. Yeah, so I feel like the Niners they're gonna be at home. They're for home crowd. They're that team, dude, that's been so close to winning the Super Bowl. They keep getting there and they keep falling short. And I feel like maybe this is the year.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because last year it looked like they were going to go to the Super Bowl, and Brock Purdy tore his UCL, and he couldn't throw the ball anymore for the game. He made a recovery that was great, came back this season. We talked about game managers. He is the picture of game manager in the dictionary. That's exactly what he does. And that's going to be a good thing for them because unlike the Dallas Cowboys, he's not going to throw 2 interceptions against this Packers defense. Brock Purdy will not turn the ball over this game.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And plus they got McCaffrey to run the ball. They have so many weapons, man. It's going to be hard for the Packers to control all that. I'm going 35-21 49ers.
35-21? I have 31-17. So same spread, but just a little bit lower scoring game.
Yeah, so I'm predicting 49ers, Lions in the NFC Championship, and Ravens, Bills in the AFC Championship.
Yeah, I think that's what I have as well. So we're on the same page. So that means this week in the Pick'em, we really have no wiggle room. We both have to get it right. We're gonna
yeah. It's gonna do or die, Wayne.
No hedging our bets this week.
No.
All right, so you have a segment here. I don't know if you want to kick it to you. If you want to go through these questions, I'm going to bring up our fun graphic, which is "I'm a loser, baby."
All right, so I came up with a segment this week. I'm going to call it post-mortem questions for teams who lost in the playoffs. So hence the tagline, "I'm a loser." The first question is, and I'm going to let Wayne answer first, the QB with the most uncertain future.
And I thought it was funny because I started writing down names, because when you hear the question unsure or uncertain future, your initial thing is like they may not have a job. But I think there's more to it than that. So initially I'd written down Joe Flacco, right? But Joe Flacco's future is certain. He's not going to be the quarterback next year. Same thing with Kenny Pickett. I said he's not going to be the quarterback next year. So for me, the most uncertain future of one of the losers is Matt Stafford, because I don't know if he's coming back or going to retire. So I think he has the most uncertain future.
And I'm glad that you labeled it that way, that uncertain can mean many different things, because I'm with you on that. And mine would be Baker Mayfield, because his is uncertain, because you don't know if the Bucs are going to want to pay him what he wants, if he's going to want to stay there, if he gets an offer somewhere else, maybe Denver, wink, wink. I don't know. I'm going to say Baker.
Now, if Baker does not stay in Tampa, and I think that they should hold on to him, I'm sure they'll explore some different options. You know where I really like Baker Mayfield landing is in Seattle. Although they've got Geno Smith. Yeah, Geno's got that contract. I don't know if it'll be easy to bring in Baker. Or I don't know how much of that's dead cap, but I like Seattle for him. But yeah, you're right. He's uncertain. I think what's certain about him, though, is that he's going to be a starter somewhere next year, whether it's Tampa or somewhere else.
And I would totally agree with you on that. I'm just saying uncertain, and I'm kind of putting that in the ether because I kind of hope that it is uncertain, so we maybe have a shot, but who knows? Okay, so the next question is the team that's closest to the Super Bowl.
I said it's the team that went to the Super Bowl last year in the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, they're 1 year removed from going to the Super Bowl. They had some injuries this year. They had some bad play calling on the defensive side of the ball. But you look at that team from top to bottom, offense, defense, they're set. They had a really good draft this year. They're going to probably have another really good draft this coming year because their GM is very good. I think that Hurts needs to learn how to be more of a game manager. Maybe this was a lesson for him this past season. But like I said, they were in the Super Bowl a year ago. So to me, they're still the team that's the closest.
That's a good pick. I'm going to go with the Cowboys because every year they're always in that conversation like, oh, they should be in the Super Bowl, and every year they lose. So I feel like they're the team that's always closest to the Super Bowl because every year they're always in the talk for it. So I'm going to say Cowboys.
Okay.
And the next question, the team that's farthest from the Super Bowl.
The farthest from the Super Bowl. So again, I kind of looked at these teams. I had 3 teams written down, but I'm going to say that the team that is the farthest from the Super Bowl is the Cleveland Browns. So the Steelers, people can point to the Steelers because they have an uncertain
I'm going to say Steelers.
Their quarterback situation is in flux, but they're a quarterback away. If they bring in Russell Wilson, they're a 13-win team, 13-4. They're going to be a 2 seed or what? They're going to make a playoff run again next year. They're going to be close to the Super Bowl. The Rams, I'm thinking as constructed, they've got Stafford. As long as they have Stafford, they're still going to be in the playoff hunt. They're still going to be in the Super Bowl hunt. The Cleveland Browns, even though they were a top seed this year, their defense is really great, and they did so much. They really overcame a lot of odds. I don't trust their quarterback situation. Even if Deshaun Watson comes back, it seems like his days are behind him. They went with Joe Flacco. He's not going to be back. That whole quarterback situation is a mess, and no team with a messy quarterback situation is close to a Super Bowl.
You know, I can't argue with any of that, dude. I think I totally agree with you in the sense that I don't have faith in Deshaun Watson either. I feel like all that creepy stuff that went on and him trying to like regain his career, it's just not going to happen. You know, I feel like stuff like that affects you, and it's just not going to affect him the same. He's not going to be the same quarterback ever the same, I don't think. But he did get lucky in getting that guaranteed contract. So if he doesn't play well, no matter what, he's getting paid. So I guess it worked out for him. So, but I'm going to say, go ahead.
I was going to say the downside to his situation is that unlike Kobe Bryant, remember Kobe had the rape charges. They got dropped and all that. Well, this whole thing with Deshaun Watson, I think, has kind of been swept under the table in terms of the accusers. But Kobe Bryant then went out and went to the finals 3 more times and won 2 championships. That's why nobody really brings that stuff up or remembers it much anymore, because winning cures all. Deshaun Watson hasn't won anything since then, and it doesn't look like he's going to win anything ever again. So his legacy is going to be the massages.
Yeah, and also, like, in my opinion, I don't think Kobe did any of that stuff, and I think a lot of fans agree with me. So that's probably why he didn't get the flack that he did. We all know the stuff that Deshaun did.
Well, nobody knows.
Well, nobody knows, but there's a good possibility the stuff that happened.
Okay. I'm not going to sling any arrows at anybody.
Okay, so the last question, what's the team we will talk most about during the offseason?
The stupid Dallas Cowboys. We're going to talk about the Dallas Cowboys, whether they win, lose, draw, who their coach is, who their quarterback is. That's what everyone's going to be talking about.
I love you, Wayne, because that's exactly what I was going to say. That's everything you just said is totally it. They always talk about the goddamn Cowboys. So, of course, it's going to be the Cowboys. And it's just funny, when I wrote down this question, I literally just laughed and said Cowboys. And I was like, watch, Wayne's going to say the same thing. And I called it.
Yeah. That's all anyone talks about all offseason, no matter how the season ends for them.
Right. And everybody loves talking about it because it brings them ratings, dude. So they're like, oh, Cowboys this. How can we bring up the Cowboys today?
All right. So that brings us to our 2-minute warning. I did have a fun topic to talk about. What do you think it's going to be about? Probably my guy, Bill Belichick, who interviewed for the Atlanta Falcons job. There is mutual interest there, although they also interviewed Jim Harbaugh. The Falcons are a really sexy destination because they're not a lot of pieces away from getting to the Super Bowl. They're a coach and a quarterback basically away from getting to the Super Bowl. Now, if you're wondering, all right, you bring in Bill Belichick, then what? How do you get him there? Well, I'm glad you asked, Mark. Well, what you do is you read my articles on Fansided, which is 3 perfect trades to jumpstart the Bill Belichick era for the Atlanta Falcons and 3 signings that could launch Bill Belichick era for the Atlanta Falcons. I'm going to tell you 3 signings and 3 trades that the Falcons can make after they get Bill Belichick that will get them to the Super Bowl, and he will hoist the trophy, the Lombardi Trophy, win the Super Bowl with the Falcons in year 1 if they do those 6 things. And so read those articles, because those are 6 moves that are guaranteeing that the Falcons win the Super Bowl next year.
Okay, I'm going to read that, Wayne. I haven't had the chance to read it, and I am going to read it. But the only pushback I'll have with him going to the Falcons is, I'm not sure you know this, but Arthur Blank, the owner of the Falcons, he has this guy hired with him. His name is Rich McKay. He's kind of like his right-hand man. So he's like his guy that knows football for him and gives him all advice about football. And so I feel like the only way that he's going to get Bill Belichick is if he gets rid of this guy. Belichick's not going to want some middleman having to deal with to go to the owner. He's going to want a straight direct line to the owner. He's not going to want to deal with Rich McKay. So I feel like that's the only way it's going to work.
Well, see, and I disagree, because he did offer to relinquish the personnel role with the Patriots to stay there as the guy. He just wants to coach now. He wants to pass Shula, and then he wants to retire. He's 2 years away from it, is the way I look at it. Even if he wins 12, 13 games next year with the Falcons, which I think he will, if he wins the Super Bowl and wins 13 games, he'll pass Shula. He could retire after 1 year. But I think this is a 2-year commitment for Bill. That's the only reason I think the Falcons will be interested in Harbaugh. I think we can all agree Bill's a better coach than Harbaugh. But you could get Harbaugh for 5 or 6 years. Bill's in it for 2 and he's done, right? So it's like you have to believe that bringing him in guarantees you a Super Bowl in one of those 2 seasons. And he's not just coming in there to win 7 games a year, then peace out. So I think that he's going there to win a Super Bowl. If I'm them, I sign him, I make these 6 moves, and I win the Super Bowl.
I feel like in some weird way, Wayne, I have this gut feeling that he's waiting out one of these teams that lost, like maybe the Eagles or the Cowboys. I think Belichick wants to go to a team that's ready, dude. He doesn't want to go to a team that doesn't have a quarterback that he's uncertain of, that he has to pick one, because he's not good at that. So I feel like wherever he goes, he's the one that's set up like Tom Brady did when he went to Tampa.
I will say this, because I think Bill is the perfect fit in Atlanta, and that's not just me being biased and wanting him to go there. I do think he's the perfect fit there. You know who I think is the perfect fit for Philadelphia is Mike Vrabel.
That's good. That's good. I think I've heard that from other analysis people that say that. Yeah. So that's just my opinion. Is like I feel like Belichick's not going to want to deal with the middleman, even though he's relinquished the GM role, and that he's going to want a set team. So I just feel like, and also they let him leave without a deal. So if you really want a guy, you're not going to let him leave without signing him to your team. And I feel like that was a mistake by Atlanta. So I just feel like he's going somewhere else. I don't think it's Atlanta. That's just my gut feeling, Wayne.
Okay. What do you want to talk about?
All right, so my 5-minute warning. I'm just going to rant about my Broncos because I can, and that's usually what we do during this time. I don't really have much to talk about them because we are in complete disarray. We're back in QB purgatory, which really sucks. And speaking of QB purgatory, I hear all the draft talk about how we might go after Bo Nix or we might go in free agency and get Mason Rudolph. And I'm sorry, but all these options sound terrible. And granted, I know I said I wanted us to draft a quarterback, but not Bo Nix. Come on, let's make a sexy draft pick like Jaden Daniels or Michael Penix Jr., like something like that. Please, Sean Payton, make the right move. Get us a quarterback and get us out of quarterback purgatory. Please, pretty please, Sean, please. That's all I ask.
I think that the reason that he might draft a quarterback, because I can see the case for and against, right? If Sean Payton drafts a quarterback, he has bought himself 2 years no matter how bad his record is, because you're getting a rookie quarterback. You're going to be given time to develop them. I think if he goes out and gets a Kirk Cousins or a Baker Mayfield, he's going to be expected to win now. So for job security purposes, it makes sense for him to draft a quarterback now. However, I mentioned a couple shows ago the conspiracy theory of him getting a Colorado guy in Shadur Sanders, which means he has to lose next year.
That could happen, but I mean, I feel like if we start a rookie, that's likely to happen, because they're going to have a lot of growing pains unless it's like, well, I'm going to throw Jordan Love out there, but even though he sat for 3 years, but somebody like that who in their first year starts and just blows it away, like CJ Stroud. And who knows if these guys are going to do that? Who knows if Bo Nix is that guy, if Jaden Daniels is that guy? Who knows?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because in a couple of weeks, we're going to have Dan Sully Sullivan on the show. He is a draft expert, and he can tell us because his first episode on the show is going to be quarterbacks and wide receivers. So we can ask him questions about those because I'm curious too. Is Bo Nix a legitimate NFL quarterback? And my question for you, being a Broncos fan, you guys have a pick that you could take a quarterback. You could also get a Kirk Cousins or Baker Mayfield, whatnot. Probably more Kirk Cousins because he seems like that 1 or 2 year thing, whereas Baker seems like a more 4 year kind of deal. Right. My question for you is this: like, how do you feel about drafting a guy in the first round this year at quarterback, and then also signing a Kirk Cousins and letting that guy sit for 2 years before he gets to start, or would you rather save drafting a quarterback until you absolutely have to?
No, that would be the ideal scenario, dude. But that's all if we draft the right guy and we get the right free agent guy, like that's all going to mesh well somehow. And, a lot of times older guys like Kirk Cousins they don't want to help out the young guy. They're like, I've been in this league so long, just figure it out. You just follow my lead, that type of thing. So, but I think that would be the best scenarios. We need a young guy to come in, learn from a vet. Like this is how a vet does it. This is what you need to do. And if everybody keeps linking Bo Nix to us because Bo Nix is kind of a guy like that Sean Payton would probably want, a guy that stays in the pocket. He's got a good arm. All his offense is based on timing, and Bo Nix could do that. So that's why he's linked to us. So I'm just going on the faith of that Sean Payton has done well with some quarterbacks that nobody thought he could do well with. So I'm hoping that he can do that with whatever rookie he does pick.
I did want to ask you this too. We missed it when we talked about the Lions, but I do want to bring it up here at the end of the show. What happens with Jared Goff? Because this is the last year of his deal. So I know we both said that they're probably not going to go to the Super Bowl, but has Jared Goff earned a contract extension with the Lions, and how long of an extension? Because they drafted Hendon Hooker to be his replacement.
Right. And he looked really good. I don't know. I would say that guy's got a few more years. Maybe they're doing what you just said. Maybe they're going to pay Goff for a couple more years, let that guy sit behind him and learn. And then, I don't know. I would say at least a 2 to 3 year deal.
Well, that's why I think, and we talk about Baker Mayfield having the same issue, right? He's not going to play for a 1 year deal in Tampa. It's got to be a 3 or 4 year deal. Jared Goff's not going to play on a 1 or 2 year deal in Detroit, especially with Hooker there, knowing that that's his replacement. Definitely. He's going to want a 4 year secure deal. So my question is, let's say I'll pitch both quarterbacks to you right now, and we'll do kind of like a rapid fire, if you will. Baker Mayfield says, I want 4 years or I'm out. Is he in Tampa next year?
Yes, I think he's in Tampa. I think they'll pay him for 4 years. They need someone.
If Goff says I want 4 years or I'm out, is he still in Detroit?
I think he is. I think Campbell likes him a lot.
Okay. Well, maybe. I like Hendon Hooker. I'm not going to lie. I think if Hendon Hooker doesn't hurt his knee his last year in college, he's a top 10 draft pick. So I really love his talent. I do love the opportunity for him to sit behind Jared Goff, especially in a deep playoff run, and learn just like Jordan Love did. I don't think Hooker has Jordan Love's arm. Love has a cannon. But Hendon Hooker is a game manager in his head. So I think that he's learning from a game manager. I think he's going to be the future starter for Detroit. I think Jared Goff is out because I don't think they give him 4 years.
So you think he's out after this year?
Yes, I think because I do think that he's going to want a 4-year deal. I think they're going to offer him 2. I do think they do, but I don't think he's going to take it. And I think you could see Jared Goff in Denver, maybe.
Huh. I wouldn't mind that either. So I guess we'll see. It's going to be an interesting offseason, Wayne. I can't wait for our draft coverage. I'm really glad that you brought that up. And I'm glad that's partly why I brought up our draft guides, because I'm really looking forward to it. So everybody that tunes in soon, when the season's over, we're going to be drafting, doing a draft special. We're going to have Wayne's guy on, Sully, and he's a draft expert, kind of like a Mel Kiper. And we're going to break down 2 teams an episode. And then the special week when we talk about my Broncos, I'm going to have my guy, Cecil Lammy, who's a draft guy here in my local town. So look forward to that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that if you really like deep analysis of players coming into the draft, you're going to love Sully. This is a guy who really watches game tape. That's all he does all year long. And this is a guy, he says things I don't even understand. He'll be like, oh, you have to watch the way this guy turns his hips after he's gone about 5 yards. I'm like, okay.
Well, I think he's gonna learn us a little bit, Wayne.
Yeah, I think so for sure. But yeah, great show today. I loved Jim chiming in with the questions. People stuck around with us right to the end. We still have viewers, so I appreciate that. Hit us up on social media. We are there. Questions, comments, criticism. We want it all. Email us, segment ideas. It'll get thrown up here if you want to see it. If you know you're going to watch next week and you want to hear your name mentioned, send us an idea. You'll get your name mentioned.
Yes, email us. My buddy Mark's done it numerous times. Chime in, send us an email. Any kind of question you have at the NFL, even if it's about a uniform question, I'm your man. I'll debate it with you.
Yeah, and if you really want an expert opinion, ask me a question. That's really
yes. Ask Wayne. He knows all the names and numbers. He's the guy.
That's right. There we go. All right. Well, hey, great show, Mark. It was great having the show with you. And hey, listen on Spotify, everybody. If you're already listening on Spotify, then never mind. But if you're watching and you caught the end of it, listen to the whole thing on Spotify.
Yeah, if you didn't catch the live stream every Wednesday, Spotify is your place to be. Party on, Wayne.
Party on, Mark.